really want to go over and talk about counseling and how hard it is to reach out.
I think as humans, we're not meant to be alone. So
Right.
we need, a community, we need support. And a lot of times talking about it, can be helpful in the sense of like expressing and be able to talk about what happened to it serves its purpose and is great.
Hi, welcome to Stronger Than the Storm, a podcast by Beacon for Hope Suicide Prevention. I'm your host, Melissa Owen.
And I'm your co-host, Kenny Rodriguez.
Today, we are joined by Ana Vallecios. She is a licensed clinical professional counselor with Healthy Thoughts for Growth Counseling. Welcome, Ana.
Thank you for having me, Melissa.
Absolutely. Today, we really want to go over and talk about counseling and how hard it is to reach out. We live in a society now where we have kind of been, I don't want to say we've learned that reaching out is a sign of weakness. That, only certain types of people reach out, and there's really that stigma attached to it. So today, what I would like to focus on is, letting people know the types of counseling that's available, that there are, it's not just cognitive therapies. What are protective factors? What's a support system look like? And those sorts of things. So I guess as a therapist, if you could kind of give us a little background of what are the biggest misconceptions that you see when people come in?
And like you mentioned, stigma is still pretty big. I think as a society, we're getting better at not, creating more stigma for people who want to reach out. But we still see, some of that, the weakness side, right? That, or even maybe sometimes like the misconception is if you go to therapy, something bad is going to happen. You're going to be hospitalized, or authorities are going to be called, and it's not necessarily true. We're here to help people function better, get to where they want to be in their life. I think teaching, ourselves and just like in the community in general, like as parents, as neighbors, as friends, that it is okay to reach out, that it's okay to have therapy to function better. I think that will help with the stigma.
Absolutely. Kenny, in your line of work, when you're with the police department, when you're on calls that are mentally health or mental health driven, and you come into contact with somebody who would benefit from going, reaching out for help and such, how difficult is it to try to not convince somebody to go get help, but really to talk to them and really share with them the benefits of reaching out?
Well, when I talk to them, they're in crisis, so it's a little bit different conversation that we have. The immediate need is what we're trying to meet. If they're having suicidal ideations, we try to get them to get screened at Newman's. They do telescreening, and so we try to get them there first, and after that, our involvement is done. We don't know where they go to. I know a lot of them get referred to Crosswinds, and that's basically because of a um, financial uh, financial. They don't have the funds to get private counselors. So I don't know if it's the best method, or I know competition breeds success. So if there's other services out there that are offering, that are better at what they're offering, I wish we had more services to lead them to. So, but
All right, Kenny. Like I think, financial, it's a big thing.
It is.
A lot of people in the community don't have access to healthcare. Mental health, just like any other medical treatment, is expensive or can get expensive.
Absolutely.
Depending on their needs, depending on the type of treatment that they're receiving. And like you said, it's not just cognitive. There's multiple types of therapy out there, and depending on the need, depending on the situation of the individual, it could get pricey. And so Crosswinds, being the community mental health center, for sure, it would be more accessible. um, than a private provider. Um, there is, like we do sliding scale fees and we do provide some access to mental health depending on their needs, financial needs. Crosswinds would do that as well. Insurance is a big thing, if they're able to access insurance and will cover some of that. But that is a big fear of people. How much is it going to cost? Can I afford treatment?
Right. Right. And I think that's probably the biggest barrier when I've spoken to individuals is that financial barrier and not knowing that outside of community mental health that there are private providers that do have other options when it comes to, a sliding scale. There might be interns that are, training within their facilities that are being, overseen that they could see as well. So just getting that information out there when that person is ready to take that step, I think is
Yes.
important too. And I think for myself, I always talk a lot about the support, the onion. What onion do you have when you peel back your layer? So, how important is having a support system in place, especially for individuals who choose to make that step and seek therapy? What role do they play in their journey?
Absolutely. I think as humans, we're not meant to be alone. So
Right.
we need, a community. We need support. We need people around us. We need our families, our friends. But that support can be different depending on the individual. Sometimes we think we have to have our family support us, which, don't get me wrong, very important. And if we can all be on the same page, we'll be great. But knowing that, you can reach out to the community supports and maybe friends, coworkers, people who are willing to be there will make a big difference, knowing that you can call.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I think it's important. I know I have my support, for different things and then my one or two people that are outside of my family that I reach out to as well because a lot of times, you're in therapy to deal with family matters. So it's
Absolutely.
hard to see them as a support
Yes.
while you're going through that journey.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't want to burden their family with the struggles they go through, and
Yes.
it's easier to reach out to somebody that's like you, Anna, that's a professional or somebody that is an experienced friend
Mhm.
dealing with that. So
Absolutely. And I think when talking about burden, especially, I know I've had conversations and I know Kenny and I have had extensive conversations when it comes to men seeking help. Feeling a burden, how do you talk to somebody who feels that way and almost like they're not worthy of therapy, that their problems aren't bad enough?
I think that right there is really big, not bad enough,
Mhm.
right? And I see a really good number of men seeking out therapy in the last couple of years. I think that number has, which it's exciting to
That is
see that,
exciting.
and
Yeah.
makes me happy to see that men are willing to come out and
Mhm.
talk to somebody about their problems, and it's not about problems, right? It's about sometimes we just need that support from somebody else
Yes.
outside of your family, outside of the people that you feel like you're going to burden.
Mhm.
You should be able to know how to handle it.
Mhm.
Um, so it's good to reach out.
Yes. So, what can we do to help normalize these conversations when it comes to mental health? I know I have them openly with my friends, um, and that allows them to have more candid conversations with their, friends or coworkers or such. But as a society, we still are heavily stigmatized. So, what can we do you think, just as the layman out there who has a lived experience with mental health, but not in the field of providing services? What can we do to help ease those conversations? They're gonna be uncomfortable, of course, but how can we make them more comfortable?
Yes, and I think that conversing with each other, right? Having the conversation and, you know, if we have that experience, like we have gone to therapy, we have experienced it, we have gotten out, something hopefully good,
Yes.
a good experience, be able to communicate that, and feel confident that it is okay to talk about going to therapy, going to a provider to talk about our depression or anxiety or whatever else, life changes too
Mhm.
doesn't have to be a mental health disorder.
Right.
Um, and I think that will start to decrease some of that stigma.
Well, let's talk about that. A lot of people have the misconception of you go to a therapist because you have a mental health issue. But a lot of the times it's just being overwhelmed with life and all the responsibilities and, forecasting into the future and the uncertainties. So, how can we encourage those, again, who feel like maybe they don't fall into that criteria of, well, I don't need to go see somebody. I'm just having a hard time right now. But that hard time seems to keep, at some point it can turn to a crisis situation. So, how can we encourage our friends, our family, our peers, or anybody that we come into contact with to know that therapy isn't just for, diagnosed mental health issue, and it's for everybody.
And I think a lot of people have it's a mystery to people that have never been to a therapist. I mean, even to me, because I've never been to a therapist. So I don't know what you do when you see your patients or what kind of therapy you do. I know there's other forms of therapy, and yeah, there's a lot of, I guess, mystery behind, because most people, like you said, there's the people don't feel like they're worthy to go to counseling, or they don't feel like they have a mental illness, like they're not like they see on TV. So
Yes, and I think social media, TV, can help at times, but also it misrepresents what we do in therapy. And therapy looks very different depending on the provider, depending of the location where you go, and what your symptoms are. What is it that you're wanting to get out of therapy? Um, so the type of therapy I do, I vary again depending on the type of treatment I'm providing, depending on what the need of the person is. So if somebody were to come in with maybe some depression or um, feeling like they need a change in their life. We could do some cognitive therapy, um, we use mindfulness. Well, I use accelerated resolution therapy that is more geared to trauma, but we use it for decision making and, you know, getting comfortable with yourself of where you are in life and maybe exploring a little bit of what's stopping you, what's stopping us from making that jump, from making that change.
Getting outside of your comfort zone almost.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, absolutely. And I have had my own experience with different therapists and for different reasons. I needed somebody to help walk me through my divorce. So I had somebody specifically for that. And it was fantastic to meet the needs of myself and my children for that. And then once getting through that, we get into COVID and all that
Mhm.
came with that, and then had some other needs. So we needed to find somebody that was more trained, more skilled in trauma-based therapies, and such. But what are the benefits, would you say, of therapy? What can you share to try to really entice somebody to come seek help?
Yes. I think, one of the biggest things that, we do get out of therapy is that if we go to friends, if we go to families, they have their own, you know, idea of what we should do
Mhm.
because it benefits everybody else. A therapist does not benefit with any decision you make, other than seeing you happy, seeing you content with a decision, even if it's difficult. So I think those are some of the benefits you get out of therapy, being able to not feel judged or not feel pressure to make a decision in either direction.
Oh yeah, that pressure from family, especially.
yeah,
The judgment a lot of times if you have family members and even friends who aren't supportive of it. Well, I think it's interesting how we kind of discount a lot of things that might be really important to someone, and then to us we see it's very almost trivial that they would get so
Yes.
upset by something like that. And when we start blanketing everybody, well, I wouldn't react that way, so you shouldn't either. What's the big deal? I think we really start alienating people. So I agree. The benefits of therapy, it's like going to your chiropractor. You get that, once a month, you get body back in alignment. It's nice just to have a physical for your mind, and to get some of those thoughts. And my own experience was I found myself talking about things that I didn't think still bothered me, decades later, and found out that that was really the root cause of how I was experiencing my life, my journey through life already, and being able to address those. Like you said, getting out of your comfort zone, really, okay, why am I afraid to make that step? Because this is still holding me back.
Right.
I'm allowing it to. And why am I allowing that? Because I'm afraid to face it. And then when you have, especially a therapist that you trust and you're able
Yes.
to really be vulnerable, put the work in too. And I think that's another misconception of, oh my goodness, I'm going to have all this quote homework to do and I'm already overwhelmed because that's why I'm going to a therapist. So now here's just something else. But actually the activities and things that I've been given anyway are things that naturally like work into my everyday life.
Yes.
I just never pinpointed that's what they were.
Yes, I think one of the biggest thing to me, or that I see, some of my clients come in, is that when they have the safe space to
Mhm.
talk about the problem or the problems,
Mhm.
um, it allows them to explore different areas of their lives, whether that's, past, present, or even future, that you don't get to do that with your friends and family.
That's right. That's right. I remember my first day with a therapist. It was a laundry list of things and being asked, what would you like to start with? And I almost had like a deer in the headlight reaction, like, oh boy, I don't know. And then she says, why don't we start here? And away we went. And it was fantastic.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
And touching back on, people, their hesitancy to go to therapy. I had a conversation with a friend a few weeks ago, and they were talking, through their problems. It wasn't, well, I don't know if it was the way it was presented was like, hey, this kind of bothers me, but it's like, you ever thought about going to therapy? And they're like, no, man. I mean, if I go to therapy, what's my work going to say?
Oh,
You know,
oh,
how are
absolutely.
they going to, they might take me off the street, and
Mm-hmm.
like, it's not like that. I mean, other officers do it, but
Right. Right.
so
And I think for men especially, that stigma attached to men seeking therapy is still, I like the fact that you're seeing so many more men coming. That's fantastic. But still, when I talk to my guy friends and stuff, they're like, oh, I just need to go get a drink with a friend, which is fine. At least you have that connection with somebody. But there's just some things that need to be, helped to unravel with a professional for
Yes,
sure.
for sure.
so what kind of, and me as a man, or just somebody that's never been to therapy, what could they expect with you by going through a session with you or a couple sessions? And I think you mentioned that insurance covers it too, because I know a lot of people, like, there's that fear that there's going to be a big financial responsibility to it. And I don't think in the past insurance has covered, you know, therapy before, but I think it's, now that they're doing that, that's a good thing.
And you're right. I think, the first step would be, checking with your insurances. If you do have insurance, check with your plan, right? To see if mental health is something that is covered. A lot of the times clients don't know that their plan covers mental health. Sometimes it doesn't, but that's an easy, thing to maybe sometimes add. If financial is a, a barrier, then talk to a provider. What are the options? There's options out there. Like I mentioned, I do payment plans, interns also. Um, can see at a very low cost, or no cost at all. Payment plans, there is options out there. But to answer, your initial question of like what to expect, what to expect from me as a provider. So usually that first session is, we sit down, we kind of go through a lot of different areas of your life, see where you are, what brings you to therapy, what would you want to get out of. I think it's important for me to know what is it that you as an individual want to get out of therapy, but also where do you want to see yourself, after we're done? And that could be even after that one first initial session. I don't expect people to be like, well, here in 5 sessions, I want to be in this area of my life. Okay, that would be great if you have a vision for that. But what do you want to feel? How do you want to, you know, look at yourself by the end of that session? And I think that's where I start normally.
What is the most common? I know you can't tell me, the
Specifics.
specifics, but for men, what is the most common issue that you see, without going into too much specifics? Like, is it uh, to me, the mental health, the therapy, still there's still a lot of mystery for myself, because I don't know, and as far as you asked me if where do you want to be in 5 sessions, I really don't. I wouldn't
You
know.
wouldn't know.
Yeah,
But how would you want to feel at the end of the session today?
yeah. I don't know.
I think again, it depends of what brings you here.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're not in therapy right now,
Yeah.
so it's different. But the moment you make that call, there is a reason why you made that call, right? To schedule an appointment. And a lot of the times, some of the things I see, just in general for everybody, but typically with men, if we're focusing on men's needs for therapy, would be having teenage daughters who they don't understand, who they can, well, as a man, I feel this way. If they're doing this, or if they're having makeup, if they're having a dress, as a man, I, have an issue with that. Okay, that's great. How is that really making you feel? Like, what would be that problem? You know, in exploring, what are the barriers as a parent, as a husband, sometimes, right? Um, that prevent you, or maybe makes you so upset or so confused about why your teenage daughter wants to go out, right? Um, Sometimes is adjusting to, family issues. I go to work, I come home, I provide. My role is over. Not always. How do we adjust to that? I want to feel happier when I come home, and I don't want to come home and maybe feel frustrated with the noise and the chaos from our families. And so being that support, because men also come home and it's like expected to help, you know, and that can be very overwhelming.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah. And I think there's, unless, I haven't been there, so it's still a little bit of mystery behind it, and,
Yeah.
and it's just,
Everybody
this is
comes.
all new for me, and talking about it, talking about your feelings, is something I've been working on the last few years, and um, but there's also that, stigma, don't talk about too much because you don't want to be viewed as a weak man, and I don't know if that has anything to do with, my upbringing. My dad never talked about, I never saw, I only saw my dad cry at funerals, and other than that, and it was, he was the provider. He'd come home, and, he was, he's always there for us, and he was always there to, uh, like if you had a plan, he was always there to reality check you.
Oh.
So, and it was good, and, so, but it was also a little frustrating when you have a dream, why can't you just support it,
Yes.
but, he was right most of the time, so.
And I would challenge that. I mean, because sometimes, yes, we need a reality check sometimes, right?
Yeah.
But dreams are important.
Yeah.
If we don't start with our dreams, you really don't know that it's not going to work out for you.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, I mean, let's say he was right. He probably, like you said, he was probably right. Um, how do we learn? How do we build resilience? Is by making those mistakes,
Yeah.
right? By encountering trouble. That's how we build resilience.
And that's something I've learned as I've um, gotten older, is that you can't be afraid of making mistakes because you learn some of your best lessons from those mistakes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. I would agree with that. And when you questioned her earlier about what it's like the first day you walk in the door, sometimes you don't know why you're there because there's so much. You just know that you want to feel better.
Yes.
And you don't want to feel whatever it is you feel inside,
Yeah.
forever. So you know that there's a way to work through it, but maybe you've been to, let's say, a therapist who was just cognitive behavior, which is great in some instances. But there are times where you need that intense kind of the reality checks in your therapy too, like we get from, our parents and stuff, where you go in and you're very determined and, you just don't understand, and then your therapist is like, well, okay, validates you and then breaks it down for you where you're like, okay, I do need to take these alternative steps, still reach the same goal, but it's going to take, a little time. And I think that's another thing too. You hear therapy and I don't want to be in therapy forever, right?
Right.
And it doesn't have to be that way. And I think that's a fear of not taking that first step too. Well, take the financial aspect away from it. Okay, well, how long? Every week, every month, how much time? Um, and then what if I don't, then the fear of, I know I went through it, well, what if I don't see myself, like growing in therapy and I'm not feeling any better? And then you switch therapists and then you start all over, right? And that's a lot of time where I know with friends that therapy stops, that I don't want to have to tell my story again. It's exhausting. I just can't seem to find that perfect fit.
Yes. And I always tell my patients that finding a therapist is like buying shoes. It can look really pretty. It can just price is right.
Mhm.
You put it on, walk for 15 minutes, and it's time to put them in the trash,
Yeah.
right? um, and shop around,
Mhm.
talk, look, different modalities for different times in your life are going to work. Like you had, different
Yes.
therapists that
Mhm.
walk you through different parts of your life,
Mhm.
different situations.
Yes.
And yes, there's times that, there's this fear of like, man, I have to start all over again.
Mhm.
Not always.
Right.
Not always. Because if you're coming for a different
Mhm.
situation, a different need, you don't have to explore. You already explore that with somebody else.
Right. Right. And I think a lot of people don't think about that. They think, oh, new therapist, we start all the way back here. Yes. Yes. So why don't you share with us the different types of therapy that you specifically provide and explain, really what they're for, what their intent is for, and the
Yeah.
purpose they serve.
So I like, most therapists, I do use cognitive therapy, so CBT. But I like to focus more on the somatic work and the mindfulness and just being connected to the body and mind. So not, cognitive therapy is really just restructuring our thoughts. There's the problem behavior, and we are going to work on it. We're going to think about it before we act, right? So,
Yes.
and that sometimes can be very difficult because the reason we do things is because that's a learned behavior. It's years of patterns that we have learned from our parents, we have learned from, our people, right? And we have continued to do. So sometimes, and I know a lot of people don't like to hear let's all feelings are good, right? There's no feeling that is bad.
Right.
Let's feel our feelings, and feeling safe with that, feeling that we can nurture those parts of ourselves that are feeling hurt, that we're feeling, upset. Sometimes we stigmatize the anger, right? That
Mhm.
let's not be angry. That's not okay. Well, it is okay. There's a reason why there's anger, and maybe exploring other emotions that relate to anger. So I do a lot of the somatic work, parts work. It's something that I do quite a bit. What that is really getting into your inner selves, like um, depending on our childhood to adulthood, we experience and learn different things. So we go back to those parts of ourselves, and it's like you know complementing our whole body
Yes.
into one.
Mhm.
There's all of these parts of us that, have a purpose. How do we make it one? How do we nurture it back to healthy? And I also do accelerated resolution therapy, which is a big modality that I use for trauma. It's trauma based, it's an eye movement therapy. And what we look for is, again, connecting the body with the mind, and, you know, correcting maybe something that has happened to you in the past that continues to affect you. So, get triggered by noises and smells. By using the bilateral stimulation with the eye movements, we can correct some of that and create new connections with those smells and with those colors, people around us, which gets the nervous system relaxed, and so we can function right. We can be in situations that can trigger us into feeling scared, feeling more comfortable.
Not fearful of the next time you'll encounter that situation, that you're
Yes.
going to be able to handle it
Yes.
and keep those anxiety levels down, not zero, but at least down,
Yes.
manageable.
Absolutely.
Mhm. I can say from my own experience that accelerated resolution therapy was a lifesaver. I'd never participated in anything that type of modality before, and really learned about it through word of mouth by other people who have experienced. I wanted to know exactly what it was. Okay, what do I have to do? And I thought, okay, I'm going to give it a try because I'm hearing these positive stories. I mean, just positive stories. And when you experience it, it's 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 not scary at all when you experience it, but it is so different each time depending on what you're working on of how your whole body feels. It's a
Yes.
full body engagement. And you just are allowed to release so much of things I didn't know I was still holding on to, and just physically feeling that release. And then, a week later, think about that same situation of what I was being walked through, and my mentality about it was totally different. It's still there, but those emotions that were attached to that paralyzing fear or anger or all that was no longer there.
Yes.
So it's very empowering, I think, to experience that type of modality too.
Yes, it is. And, a lot of the people that I see sometimes that come to me for ART, for short,
Mhm.
accelerated resolution therapy, is that um, I don't want to erase that part.
Yes.
I don't want to forget it because it has helped me,
Mhm.
be more, I don't know, like not make the same mistakes, right?
Right.
And it's not about erasing it. It's really that connection of the emotional response that we have when something traumatic has
Mhm.
happened. You know, having a car accident, a good example. Sometimes the fear of getting back into a vehicle,
Mhm.
it stops us,
Yes.
right? So
Sure.
you know the facts, like you
Yes.
said, it's there.
Yes.
You know
Mhm.
exactly what happened, but maybe you're not responding.
Right. And it was interesting to me because it is all about facts then.
Yes.
It's not so emotionally charged. And it's like, okay, yes, this, and this. And then it's almost like, that doesn't bother me.
Mhm.
It's not here in the forefront of my mind where it's interrupting other daily things I'm trying to do. Yeah, you don't forget about it, but I've heard that too. That a lot of individuals are, afraid because they don't want to lose, they don't want to forget, and
Yes.
you don't forget
No.
at all. I mean, your memories are your memories,
Yes.
and such. And when I was put in situations where normally it would trigger that emotional response, it just wasn't there, and it was almost like I was looking for it because that's what I was used to. That was my normal. So then when my new normal was, oh, yeah, that happened, but we're moving on, and
We're in
that's
a safe
okay.
place now.
Right. Yes. Yes.
Yes, and I think that's why I like ART,
Mhm.
is because, with cognitive therapy, you just focus on that. It's just the factual information, and that a car is not the same car, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
but the emotional response is different. So
Yes.
we have to incorporate what our bodies are saying, what our body is responding to. So emotions, again, feelings are important.
Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So talking about anxiety, depression, a lot of people that I run into in my job, they don't that they feel that their only saving grace is medication, and they don't want to be on medication because of the way it makes them feel. so they forego it, and they're not doing anything else to address the problem. And for anxiety, I think anxiety is like the majority of the problem for a
Mhm.
lot of people. My daughter struggles with anxiety, and her wife struggles with anxiety. My youngest daughter, she struggles with it, but she's pretty physically active, so it kind of, you know, tampers it back a little bit.
Mhm.
But for the person that wants to take care of the problem but doesn't want to be on medication all their life, is are these methods good for that? Like especially for ART?
Absolutely. So, the research for ART shows that it's 1 to 5 sessions to resolve one problem. Now, anxiety is not just one problem, right? So, it might be a little bit more than that, but definitely I treat anxiety with ART, depression, um, not just the trauma. Um, ART is it's a very interesting type of therapy. It's a very non traditional therapy. Um, and you don't really talk. It's not a talk therapy. So it has with eye movements, and so you have some of those, visual problems, kind of like looking them through a movie lens, through your mind, just thinking about those problems as you're moving your eyes. And um, I walk you through that. Let's say, your anxiety of the day, your typical day, living a life with anxiety. And so as we start to decrease the emotional response, you are able to see yourself in your own typical day without those, you know, so heightened anxiety. So that's the way I treat, anxiety and depression with people.
So a person can live their life, address their issues without relying on medication.
Absolutely.
Because you watch those commercials, and me and my wife always comment on it every time you get a commercial, if you're struggling with depression, and then they list off the side effects.
Yes.
May cause suicidal ideation, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, why would you take that if it's gonna make you more suicidal?
Yes.
You know? And I think medication has its place, but it shouldn't be the crutch that you live with all your life.
And I think that's another misconception too when coming to therapy is like if you go to therapy, they're just gonna, give you all of this meds.
Right. Right.
And that's it. Medication is a tool. That's the way I see it. I'm not a medical provider, so I can't provide medication or give advice with medication. But and I would agree with you, Kenny. Like it does serve a purpose, and sometimes I do tell my clients, like, you know, let's go talk to a psychiatrist. Like I think medication will be really helpful, um, temporarily because it's a tool.
Right.
And so if you use therapy with medication, sometimes you can get faster result and eventually get out of medication. And but talking to your provider, because depending also, what is it that you're taking medication for? There's a lot of trial and error,
Yeah.
when it comes with medication. So finding the correct medication, and there is, different tools out there too, like treatments. Like there's Gene Sight, which is um, an assessment that they will do, and I'm not an expert, so I can't really talk too much, but will maybe be able to see which class of medications work better for an individual than others. But that's still not saying that this medication is the fix, right? Like this is the right medication for you.
Right.
So there's still a lot of trial and error, but I would definitely somebody, wanting or needing to change their life or struggling with anything in their life, starting with therapy, go meet with a provider, and see what you can get out of, where you can get the support you need for that. Definitely start there.
Yeah. I understand medication has its place, and it's a good tool, and sometimes it's can have a lot of negative effects that we don't need.
Right.
And that's not just with mental health, that's with physical fitness, physical wellness
Yeah.
too.
And you mentioned something, Kenny, that I don't feel like I address. The fear of coming. Um, Law enforcement. Military personnel. Like going to therapy, well, they're gonna, suspend me, or I'm gonna get in trouble, or just work in general. Because I do get that from just even not law enforcement or military, of people like, well, if my employers find out, that I'm struggling with this, they're not gonna let me work.
Right.
Teachers, all of that. And therapy should be confidential, right? It
Yeah.
is a confidential, that's your safe place. Um, we do have to, make reports sometimes if there's like unsafety for a child or an elder. We do those things. But we communicate with you, with our patients, about what the concerns are, and can we work on certain things. Suicidal ideations, homicidal ideations. Those are things that we would break confidentiality, but we will talk to our patients about it because we want you to be safe. We want everybody to be safe. Uh, but anything outside of those, we don't disclose information. We work with you to make sure that you are in the best spot in your life where you can perform and continue to work.
Yeah. And when I was struggling with it a few years back, I mean, my work was suffering, and you can tell when somebody's struggling with it because their work in any job, you get your call-ins increase, your self-isolation increases. And I thought I was going to get a lot of negative backlash, but I didn't. I mean, they offered me, um, the was it employee assistance,
EAP.
EAP,
Yeah.
yeah. And I didn't want to go to the ones that they offered because, my own personal reasons. But um, I was surprised, I thought I would get a lot of negative backlash, but I didn't. My supervisors were understanding. So
Did you feel like once you were able to communicate, this is the reason why my work is suffering, and able to open up, that like this huge weight was lifted off your shoulders, that you had been carrying that fear
yeah,
along with trying to deal with the anxiety that you were experiencing?
yeah. I mean, anxiety's it was paralyzing for
Mhm.
me, as far as my work. And but I still struggle with it every once in a while, but I know now that I don't have to have that fear, of them, of that judgment or anything.
Right.
And they don't tell anybody else. They keep it confidential. I mean, I'm the one that comes forward and tells people. Like for
Mhm.
my work, the officer that was struggling with going to therapy and being judged by the employer is like, let me tell you from experience, that's not going to happen.
Mhm. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So I would say anxiety is, everybody has, I think almost everybody has anxiety. I know I do. My best friend makes fun of me that says that my baseline is up here when normal people's is down here all the time. And it can be very overwhelming dealing with your anxiety. So self-care is something that I really try to, I'm a great speaker of self-care, but implementing it for myself, I kind of falter at. But what type of self-care would you encourage somebody who is going through therapy? Because there can be sessions when you come out of there, you go in thinking, okay, this is what I'm going to talk about, and you're confident. And all of a sudden, you're like, oh, that's not what I need to talk about today. And it switches to this, and it's really heavy. So, what types of self-care can you encourage people in therapy and, out of therapy to deploy?
You know, self kindness, like you have to be kind to yourself. I think we forget about that. We are good at, taking care of people. We're good at, especially with anxiety, that comes a lot. Can I take 15 minutes out of the day just for me? That's not selfish. That's
Mhm.
not being selfish. We can take care of ourselves. We can, say, like, well, I have to go for a walk by myself, and maybe just meditate, just like being mindful of what's happening around you. We get so busy.
Mhm.
And you mentioned anxiety, and your baseline is pretty higher than,
Mhm.
the typical person. I wonder if you notice what's really happening, and what are the things that you're doing
Mhm.
throughout the day My guess is that you don't. You
Right.
just keep moving
I just
and
keep
you're
moving
doing.
forward. Yes, because that's what I do.
Yes, in order to complete things. But
Mhm.
taking a little bit of time to be like, no, I need to sit down for just a second.
Yes.
Even if it's that 5-10 minutes a day,
Mhm.
uh,
Without feeling guilty. That's
without
the
feeling
piece
guilty.
that gets me personally is, well, I could be doing while I'm sitting here, I could be doing this. Mhm.
Yes. And you could also be doing that,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
You could also be taking care of yourself.
Yes. Yes. So what type of self-care, it's different for everybody. I know I do different things for myself. I love music,
Yes.
I like music and I'm not alone in my house very often. And when I have that opportunity, everything is off.
Mhm.
And it's almost like I just want to sit and stare at the wall. And it is the best feeling ever. I feel my body relax almost to the point where I'm tired because my body is so relaxed as I hold myself. So what's the next thing that I need to get done in a certain amount of time because I've got to switch to this and then I have to go here and those sorts of things. So what are some, I want to say like simple self-care things that individuals can do that they may not realize they have access to in their
Yes.
house?
Yes. And, a lot of times we think that self care means I'm going to go out for shopping. I am
Mhm.
going to do my hair, my nails,
Mhm.
and, buy fishing. I don't know if you fish, but fishing stuff or camping,
Mhm.
hunting, all of those things. And that's self care. Yes, it can be.
Mhm.
But there's a lot of simple things that we can do. Again, taking time throughout the day. Lunchtime at work gets busy,
Mhm.
but allowing yourself to, and I think that's a big part of it, allowing yourself to just sit with yourself, listen to the music you want to listen to, maybe go outside. Maybe not right now that the weather is still kind of cold,
Mhm.
but as the weather starts to get better, and if you like the cold, that's okay too. Like
Mhm.
a few minutes outside, look at the trees,
Yes.
sit with yourself, not necessarily thinking about anything, but just being there present with yourself. I think that's a big thing. Finding a hobby,
Mhm.
coloring,
Oh, mhm.
those are things you can easily do at home.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay. I find getting to clean my house, taking the
Yes.
time, like the 30 minutes I need just to vacuum the living room and that feels better and getting the trash taken out, just those small tasks that for some reason I just can't fit in to the day.
Yes.
My mind thinks they can't be fit in because that's a less priority than this over here. That's not complete either. So being able to complete those small tasks.
I look at how is that making you feel after you're done it.
Mhm.
And if that's bringing you a lot of, uh, if it weights that comfort, right? Then that's self care. You're taking care of yourself. You're taking care of your needs.
Yes.
And so it's. I think with self care is so difficult to give you a straight answer because self care can be different for a
Oh,
lot of people.
absolutely. Yes. Yes.
Self care to me is just being quiet,
Mhm.
no voices around me,
Mhm.
be able to sit and maybe listen to the wind, listen to the trees, ground myself.
Yes.
That's a big part for me.
Mhm.
Um, for you, it's cleaning.
Yes.
Coming home and just watching TV sometimes that's
Mhm.
good. And I know a lot of people feel guilty about
Right.
just
Right.
sitting and
Yeah.
watching TV,
Mhm.
but
You have to be
Yeah.
doing something while you're watching TV, and then that takes the guilt away somehow.
but is that taking care of yourself?
No, it's not. Mhm. Mhm.
So,
So with self-care, we talk about protective factors. What can you have in place, especially if you have high anxiety? You're going to be in a situation where okay, I'm going to be really nervous. Maybe for me, it is if I have to speak in front of a group of people and I'm on a stage, elevated above people with a microphone. Those are like my big three to really get my anxiety just like sky high to where I can almost hear my heart beating, just to be in front of that group of people. So when I'm in those situations, I talk about it. I have to talk about it. I need that reassurance. It's going to be fine. You've done this many times before, you have support in the audience. Just focus on them. How can you build relationships? How important is having key people in your life that support and help you identify your protective factors? Because those are unique too to each individual, I feel like.
yes, it is. It is very unique, and learning yourself, knowing yourself really well. What are some things that will create that anxiety. You're talking about the microphones, you're talking about cameras, and you know, who's the people there, maybe, right? Um, what have you done in the past? And I go back to sitting in your body, sitting in your own emotions, and recognizing, like, what are those feelings, those sensations in your body coming from? Nurturing that. It's going to be okay.
Mhm.
You're right here, right now. You're okay.
Right.
And so, is there somebody, a friend, a family member, somebody that, knows that that's difficult for you? Having that conversation with them before instead of just ignoring
Right.
what we're feeling.
Right. My best friend, we just had our masquerade ball and I had to give a speech and it had to be elevated with a microphone. And she says, I'm not even going to look at you. And that's all I needed.
Yes.
And then I said, even the back of your head almost made me cry. But I think it
Yes.
was not because I was up in front of people, but the support
Yes.
fact that she knew all my anxieties and just knew her just being there was all I needed. And please don't look at me.
Yes. What do we need?
Yes, yes. So how can we like um like express our needs to the people who are most influential in our circles of these are the protective factors that I need, or what is even a protective factor? Like what's the definition of a protective factor?
Yeah, you guys are kind of talking language I don't
Okay.
understand. Like protective fact. A lot of these terms I'm gonna have to look up because I don't know. I'm a newbie in this.
Try to put it on, your line of work. You're doing all of this cameras and stuff. What are you doing to protect yourself from things working the way it should work?
It's got you like for all this, you have to have a method to the madness and stuff like that. And I wasn't as bad this time as I was the first time because I had a lot of anxiety setting up, just setting up. And if you see, I'm getting up and I'm checking things and stuff like that. But um, I guess just keeping a method to the way you do everything, and my office is a mess at home, but I know where everything is at, and um. And same thing with my bags and stuff like that. I know where everything goes, but I don't have, like, a lot of videographers will have every cable labeled, every camera labeled, every battery that goes with the camera labeled, and that's not me. I just don't have that gift of organizing. But I know that you know if I have to work with somebody else, I have to get on board with their method too because.
And so those are part of protecting factors, right? Like getting up and checking the cameras, making sure everything is still working, properly, so everybody can hear us talk. Um, making sure ahead of time, like, okay, what do I know about my equipment? I know where things are. I know what they are, what I need to do to connect and do all of those things, right? What makes me, be secure and safe, because that makes you safe, right? That
Right.
makes you feel safe, knowing that things are working the way it should be working. You know how to, you know, work on all of these little gadgets that you have here. Um, what makes me safe? Giving a speech, what makes me safe? Who's there? Who's around me? Or if nobody else is there, what can you do? Like what, looking at the wall, looking at people's heads, knowing that I know the topic, I know I prepare myself, I'm here for a reason. It's going to be okay.
Yes. Mhm. And what I do for my protective factors is who am I connected with?
Yes.
So I think that's where a lot of individuals feel like when they're alone, where I start asking questions like, who would you call if you ran out of gas? Start with a very basic thing. So they name a person and then kind of keep increasing the level of help that they would need to who is that person that when you are maybe in a crisis situation or you just got horrible news and who is your support person? And then they can see that, yes, they do have a support system. You may not be in contact with the majority of them every day, but you still have that connection. But I think it's hard to build connections, especially as we get older,
Yes.
of building those connections. So people, I don't want to say anticipate your needs, but know but know what your needs are. So, Kenny, in your line of work, so you have a dangerous job. It can get very dangerous very quickly and unpredictable at times, given your situation. So, I mean, you definitely have procedures in place. If this happens, then
Yeah.
I kind of see protective factors in certain situations that I know are going to cause me high anxiety,
Yeah.
especially that I have the plan A, B, and C in place.
Yeah. One of the things we do, and I teach, or when I was an FTO, I would teach my rookies, go to this call, but on the way to the call, like say a domestic, you plan out where you're going to park, and in your mind, you're playing through the worst scenario that could ever happen to you, which is stressful in itself.
Sure.
And so if I park here, the house is 3 houses up. I'm planning out where I have cover. I have cover behind this tree, this car, where can they ambush me? Because that's happened before in the past, and not here, but in other agencies. And so we're on our way to this call. The worst possible scenario has already happened to us in our mind, so we can, so our body will react the way we want to react. When and if it ever does happen. And one of my friends, she's no longer a police officer, but she had the worst thing in her life ever happen to her. And she learned this after the fact, but her therapist told her, what was I saying? Your body won't go where your mind's never been. So she had a car chase that went out to the county. She was by herself for a good probably 3 minutes. She went radio silent after a while, and I knew where she was at, just by her last traffic. I knew what road she was on last, and everybody did. But by the time I got there, the another officer arrived before me, and he found her. He was like, by the grace of God, he found her. But she was fighting this guy, and he was trying to take her gun, and yeah, it was her worst day, and she never did. She went to therapy. I don't think she ever recovered from it. I think she went through therapy and she thought she was good, but I think there was some more work to be done. So
And sometimes, like we were talking initially, there's so many types of different type of therapy. And talk therapy, it's amazing and serves a purpose, but sometimes we need a little bit more. And I don't know what type of therapy, she received or not, but reaching out to maybe different type of therapies like, ART would be maybe a great tool to use.
yeah,
Yeah.
EMDR, as well.
what's EMDR?
So it's very similar to ART. It's another eye movement therapy. And so those are non-traditional talk therapy approaches. Um, so definitely maybe something to explore. Don't I think a lot of the times we say, well, therapy didn't work because talking about the problem didn't change it.
Right.
Right. Look something different. Look a different approach. We go to doctors because we're having a medical problem and we don't stop with the first provider we see.
Right.
If they are not finding what's wrong with our body, then we go to a different one. We go to a specialist, right? So there's different types of therapists out there that we do different approaches depending on the problem, the situation.
Yeah, and I think that's a problem in itself, that most people don't think that there, or know that there's different types of therapy you can
Right.
go to, and
Yes.
and they get to that one session or that 5 sessions they go through, and it didn't work, and they think, well, that's all there is to offer. The
Yes.
brain is, there's how much more is out there, and so they stop and they don't go any further.
And there is help, there is different things that we can do. And a lot of times talking about it, can be helpful in the sense of like expressing and be able to talk about what happened to it serves its purpose and is great.
Mhm.
But if we're not addressing the emotional response, like we were talking earlier, then the problem will continue because maybe we won't be back at work.
Right.
We won't be able to perform and do the things that we were doing before. With ART, I think we can.
Oh, I agree. And I first heard of ART probably in the mid 2000s, I would say. And at that time, it was designed for, soldiers and PTSD coming back. And so when I noticed that more providers, they were licensed as an,
Yes.
ART, and I thought, oh, that's fantastic for, military servicemen or veterans. I never thought that, I could benefit from it, or that was, you hear trauma and you think, the worst of the worst, but we each experience trauma in very different ways,
Yes.
unfortunately. And the benefits from ART, I just can't, I don't know how many referrals I've done because I'm like, you need to do this. Trust me. You need to do it. It is real, it is helpful, and it will change your life in a positive way that you never thought imaginable.
Yes, I agree. I mean, and it was the research has been mainly done. Well, initially when it started with military and veterans,
Mhm.
um, to help with war traumas and just um, things that come with with that field. But yes, we can use it for anything. And trauma is very different for everybody. Anything that gets stuck in our brain and our body, that is a trauma.
Mhm.
It doesn't have to be life, a life-threatening situation. It
Right.
could be employment,
Oh, absolutely.
harassment.
Yes.
I mean, just
Mhm.
so many things. Going to a call, that is
Mhm.
pretty strong, and hard to see, and if we are able to provide some of that, that help, that support, the eye movements for police officers, firefighters, like
Yes.
it will maybe prevent developing trauma.
Yeah. I don't know how many, or I know of one officer that goes to counseling on a regular, but a lot of it his is from when he was a soldier and he went through like 3 tours, and so he sees the value in it, and he's open about it, and but I don't know, other than him, how many people in law enforcement or fire or dispatch, how many take care of their mental health, because I mean,
Mm.
I like I said, I don't go to counseling, but I dealt with the depression, the anxiety, and I was talking. I think I told you one time I was experiencing a lot of you talked about it earlier about just knowing, recognizing the feeling, and I was experiencing a lot of anxiety on work at work one time, and it was when I first came back from, because I left law enforcement for a year and a half, and then I came back. So, and I was on working on overnights, and I just sat with the feeling for a while, just recognizing that it's there, and just sat with it and just rode the wave,
Mhm.
and eventually it went away. So, but yeah, self care is a big part. For me, it's I got to get to the gym more. I feel so great when I come out of the gym.
Oh, yes.
Um, Music is a good one for me.
Mhm.
I recently started listening to Beethoven,
Oh, nice.
and that's a good.
Yeah.
I listen to that at work, and listening to podcasts and like other podcasts. So
Yeah.
it's
Yes. I think, I like that because we're, going back to our senses, like what we see, what we listen, what we feel, that is very important. And we forget about those things. And that is a big part of self-care. Our bodies and our minds again are just really connected and we make a big distinction. But one thing I would say is like having these conversations, and having conversations with our neighbors, with our friends, coworkers about mental health and that it's okay that we
Mhm.
can talk about it. I
Mhm.
think that will normalize it a little bit more and to be open.
Yes.
Not that we have to go and tell the world like, oh, this is the problems I'm solving or working on
Right.
therapy. No,
Mhm.
that's your own personal,
Mhm.
but the experience itself.
Mhm. I agree. I feel in the last couple of maybe 2 to 3 years that people that I interact with a lot, their opinion of therapy and being open about mental health discussions has really changed, and I think COVID had a lot to do with that, and coming back from COVID, and their own experience of that isolation and then trying to reintegrate, and they were having trouble with that, which they, caught them off guard, that they were starting to feel anxious, and they liked the isolation better because they felt safe, right? So I think we are evolving in those conversations, which is nice. But I do like those who share their own experience with therapy and the benefits from it. And you can have a negative experience too.
Yes.
Absolutely. I think everybody has. I've been to sessions before. I was like, wow, that was a total waste of my time. But then I go back the next time and it's fantastic. You're not going to hit it every time. That's just how therapy works, and that's kind of how life works too, but you keep working at it. And I think that's the big thing of people not giving up
Yes.
when they finally make that decision to make that appointment. And it's not moving as fast enough, but you have those small goals to get to that bigger goal.
Yes.
And just staying positive and having that support system to help get them there.
So a lot of people, are struggling for years, right? With the same symptoms, the same feelings of maybe not feeling comfortable in their skin, not feeling comfortable at work.
Yep.
Right. And you go to therapy, you can't expect to fix it in 1-5 sessions.
Right.
It takes work. And sometimes therapy can be difficult.
Oh,
because
sure.
understanding maybe those roots and, as we talk, it's like, oh, I had no idea.
Yes.
Had no idea that had something to do with what's happening to me today.
Right.
And that can be painful within itself, right? So we have to be kind to ourselves that it's going to take some work.
And I think the accountability piece as you go through therapy too, you see your role in certain situations.
Yes.
And so having to navigate through that too, and then accept that, because I know for my own journey, it was, this is what happened. I mean, these were the facts of the case, right? And then it was, well, okay, yes, but here was your role in that, and I've held on to this was the scenario, for years, and then being okay with, you're right. And that's okay that I did contribute in this manner, and this action, provoked this and that sort of thing. So being self-aware, I find myself very self-aware. I'm the first one to call myself out because I've had amazing therapy where I'm able to do that, and it has given me the tools to do that. And I think if you're able to do that, where you're like, you know what, that was really insensitive of me, and I'm just projecting my own, experience on you for that of the, with your dad. Well, he kind of poked holes into your dreams, right? Of staying silent. Well, this is my opinion of this situation, but I'm here 100% to support you.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of people don't realize, like I like that you said that you have to put in the work. It's just like anything else in life. You have to, like if you want to be, if you have a goal to lose 20 pounds, and you get a trainer and you don't do what the trainer says and you don't lose those 20 pounds, you can't blame the trainer. And a lot of people do, well, I went,
that's what we do though,
I
right?
went to the gym and I got this trainer and it didn't work, so, but they don't, take that self accountability into the fact. And it's just like anything else. Like you said, you have to put in the work if you want to be successful in anything, just like this podcast, we're going to have to put in the work, to make it successful and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Go to the trainer or the therapist for an hour. What are you going to do outside of that?
Right. How do we apply what we learned in that hour
Yeah.
to keep going? Yes. I know that when I started therapy, I had that talk with myself of, this is going to be hard, but in the end, it's going to be worth it, however long that takes. So, don't give up on trying and keep going back. Keep going back. Just like losing the weight, okay, you fumble along the way, right? And you feel, therapy, you feel miserable in between your sessions and stuff because then the guilt because you didn't do what you were supposed to be implementing that time. But once you finally make that decision of, okay, I'm ready. Too, and I think that's important too, of not pressuring individuals who aren't ready to be there.
No.
Yeah, because I know a lot of instances where that has happened.
You got to be ready to address whatever comes out.
It's just like getting off a certain drug. If you're not, your family might be ready for you to be off that drug and done with that addiction. But if you can't force somebody to stop. They have to get to that point where they're like, okay, now I'm at rock bottom, and now I got to put in the work. And now, they have to want to change, and they're not going to change until they want to change.
Yeah. And sometimes, there is the want.
Yeah.
You do want to change, because nobody wants to be miserable,
Right.
whether it's because of a substance or because of, our own emotions. Right? Nobody wants to be miserable. But sometimes getting out of that cycle is so difficult. And you're right, you might have all of the good things, like the family is ready for you, they're willing to support you, but you're not there yet. And we have to be ready to
Yes.
make the changes. And it's because not easy. Therapy, we've been talking about, yes, you feel better and everything, but you might feel worse before you start to feel better.
Yeah. And during the session you can, and that was, I know, a disclaimer with ART was you might be surprised
Mm-hmm.
about the emotions that you feel. And so I thought, okay, and first session was great, felt really good. And the more we did it, I can recall the one where it was uncontrollable, just tears. It wasn't like ugly crying or anything, but just that physical release. It was incredible. It really was. Yes.
That goes with anything. The first session might be great, but second or third session might not
Ooh,
be.
it might be a little rough.
Yeah. And that's where you got to really focus on, those goals that you have, and just keep going. Like, if you don't want to get up and go to therapy, because a lot of times
Yes.
you'll feel a lot better.
Yeah.
When
Oh, absolutely.
you don't want to go to the gym, get up and go to the
Get
gym.
up and go.
Yeah.
Bingo.
And gripe that first 5 minutes on whatever you're doing. And then you're like, okay,
Yeah.
you're ready. Yes.
Yeah.
So, this is something that we have tried so hard to bring to law enforcement. There's a part of, and yes, and I know all of that, but there's, so we have ART, right?
Mhm.
So that's the full therapy approach that I do. But there's also this safety. It's what we call it, SAFFT. So I say safety for short, but it's really to train not therapist people, it could be teachers, could be parents, could be advocates, it could be anybody that does not require a license. So like if you go to a call
Mhm.
and you see, I don't know, something traumatic or maybe not so traumatic, but it was, somebody run off or whatever.
Mhm.
You sit with that law enforcement officer, client, person, you do a few eye movements, and you can prevent a trauma from developing.
So that's something that you offer, or you
Yeah, I
train
can
somebody?
train. Yeah, I can train. Like if law enforcement would be open to that,
Yeah.
I could go and train all of the officers there, dispatchers, just anybody, really. And that, I mean, it won't replace therapy,
Right.
obviously,
Sure.
but it could really prevent from having, a developed trauma. Like with, I'm like trying to think of an example. So like if you pull somebody over, right?
Mhm.
And you thought that they were going to pull a gun, and it wasn't that, but just the shock of like, ooh, it felt like they were going to pull a gun on me,
Yeah.
right? That stays with you as a law enforcement. I know that it's scary because it puts you in that situation of like, do you have to shoot somebody or are you going to get killed, right? And it makes us nervous. So if you were to do eye movements, during that time, then you would feel so much comfortable the next time around. And it takes about 10 to 15 minutes.
As a therapist
Yes.
who is listening to people's problems every day, how does that affect you? As I I read I don't know if it's true or not, but I read or heard that psychologists, psychiatrists have one of the most highest level of mental health issues. So how do you, as a therapist, um, combat that? What do you do to?
Yeah.
Are you like me? Do you box it up?
No, no. Sometimes, yes, no. No, I think it's important to understand that, if as a provider, I'm recommending and saying, go to therapy. Me as a provider, I go to therapy.
Okay.
Yes, I go to therapy when I need it. Um, I have my therapist who does ART. And so I see her and she does ART on me and helps me, kind of process that. Again, it's great because with ART, I don't have to talk about the problem. I just visualize it in my mind and move my eyes and the, yep.
So when you're moving your eyes, is the therapist talking to you?
So no, when you're moving your eyes, well, they, as the therapist, you provide the directive, right, of like what you need to be thinking about, when to check for emotions and sensations. But when you're moving the eyes, that's when your brain is working, and so typically you won't talk. You're just moving your eyes, and the therapist is moving her hand.
The therapist is talking or
No,
no?
nope,
Okay.
nope. We give the directive before, so I would say like Um, so like if, for example, if I was getting rid of, an anxious sensation you're having, like my heart is pounding really hard, I would probably just tell you, notice that and give you a tool like, let's, see those butterflies fly away. And then I stay quiet. You stay quiet and you move your eyes side to side. And usually the heart slows down.
Okay.
I think that's what the cool thing with ART is too, because the first time she's like, you're not going to say much. And I thought, how's therapy going to work without talking?
Yes.
But it's true. Yeah, she gives the directive, and you do the eye movement, and it turns into a story in your head, walking through the scenario. And you are did a lot of unboxing of things.
Yes.
I got to repaint walls. Got to cross a bridge.
Yes.
Just all these positive. As soon as the bridge part came up, it was always exciting. I could feel excitement,
Yes.
and because you had walked through another scenario of something that you needed to work on specifically. And then afterwards, we would have like a brief conversation sometimes. Other times it was more than that because it brought up something else to work on for the next time.
So every therapy, or every parts of that therapy will look different.
Mhm.
And again, it's reaching the client where they are and what they need.
Okay.
I think it's very important. But yes, to answer your question, yes, I do therapy myself when I need it.
Okay.